Hello, everyone. My name is Marina Hayrapetyan. I am a product manager at Walmart Global Tech and also a chapter lead at Women in Product Washington, D.C. region. Welcome to the Lead Through Change stage. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment and thank our sponsors. Without them, this event would not be possible. Anais Nin, a French Cuban American author, once said, "Life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage." And it takes a lot of courage to advance our growth and careers. During this stage, being a leader and a coach, the next step in your career, we have two wonderful speakers. First on stage, we have Leah Feuer. Leah is a coach and a product advisor with a mission to empower people to bring their full selves to work and the world. For the past 10 years, she led product teams at big corporations, agencies, startups, and helped launch over 40 products in industries ranging from children's education to marketing analytics and e-commerce. Before starting her own coaching and consulting company, she advised teams at Consensus, which is a 50-company blockchain incubator. Leah Feuer shares her expertise with you during our next presentation, the coaching tool that changed my career. Please join me in welcoming Leah Feuer to our stage.
In college, I conjured up this dream of who I would be after graduation. I had this picture of myself wearing a pencil skirt and high heels, strutting down the hallway of some corporate office in Manhattan. I was powerful. I was on track to be a CEO or a leader of sorts. I even drew this picture where you can see I'm staring at the CEO board, but there's still this other half of me that's the nerd still in college. I didn't make it there right away. I got several rejections, as I'm sure many of you have. But eventually I got what I thought was going to be an amazing job in a leadership training program at a huge corporate company with over 6,000 people. And I was going to be part of a group of 4 people who were going to be groomed to be leaders. We were having lunch with the CEO. I was wearing my first new suit. I sometimes wore high heels to work. And at first it felt like exactly what I was looking for. But shortly thereafter, I realized market research was not for me. I felt it wasn't really creative enough, and being a junior person in a huge corporation definitely has its downsides. So I came up with a new dream. I envisioned this whole new world of tech startups and beautiful products that changed people's lives. I had never even heard of this in college. I thought, wow, this sounds really cool. I'm going to figure out how to do that. So I worked my way through a series of jobs that were related to product management, business analyst, producer, and then product manager, where I worked from everywhere from a big mixed marketing analytics company creating software for companies like Olive Garden and Red Lobster to an agency where we were creating apps for startups as well as videos and branding and working with bigger companies too, like Barney's. We did their clothing app, if anybody knows about them. And this was all great. I felt like I was, gaining momentum. I was heading towards my dream of this amazing startup culture. And I finally landed my dream job at an educational kids app company called TinyBop. And TinyBop was fantastic. I really loved it there. And I realized in hindsight, it was actually very atypical of tech startups. I'll give you a sense of our products and teams just so you know what I'm talking about. This app was called The Robot Factory, and it won App of the Year in 2015. I love this app. I find it delightful. It's not just about engineering and trial and error, but also encourages kids to play and learn that it's okay to fail and have fun. And our office and our values and vision were all about that, about empowering kids to play, sparking their curiosity, and encouraging them to explore the world around them. The team was equally whimsical and creative. I loved the culture there so much. We would watch cartoons after work instead of going for drinks and study how to learn, great different animation techniques and storytelling, and also just remember what it feels like to be a kid eating cereal and watching cartoons. And we also would do, craft nights together or learn about each other's side projects. It was a really creative environment that was really supportive. I like to say it was a mix of Wes Anderson meets Mr. Rogers. And even in this dream job, though, I had the same problem I had had in every product-related role in my entire career, which I was incredibly overburdened. I would come home thinking about products. I would wake up in the middle of the night thinking about employees and conversations. I would stay at work later than anyone else. We had a pretty good 9 to 6-ish work-life balance, and most people would leave on the dot and leave their desk and their work behind, but not me. And I thought, okay, it's normal. We're going from 1 product a year to 5. That's a lot of work. Of course, there's going to be tons of features and bugs and decisions to be made. And I thought, well, we're scaling, we're growing. Once I get to hire some PMs, which I got to have that opportunity when I became the head of product to hire my own team, I thought, at long last, this will solve the overburdened PM problem. But it didn't. It just created new challenges and new work. It helped other parts for sure. I wasn't writing as many tickets all on my own, and it was amazing to have support of team who had similar roles and understanding. But it didn't change this general issue of being completely underwater and overburdened. Okay, so I'd like everybody who's ever experienced something like the overburdened PM experience, maybe you've been too stressed at work, you've had too big of a workload, you're carrying your work home with you, throw up an emoji or put something in chat to show that you've had this experience too. My guess is over half of you have had it. It's an extremely common PM experience. It makes sense. We are people who tend to be empathetic, problem solvers, and people who like to get stuff done. So it makes sense that we're not just thinking about what are the features or the product tasks that we need to do, but what are the things we need to do to keep the whole company and team moving and going. And that's part of the job in some ways. It's partly about making great products, but it's partly about making sure your team is in a position to do that. And if both your team and your products are great, if your company's heading in the wrong direction or there's business problems that don't make sense in terms of the strategy, that's also going to make your products not succeed in the long run too. So it makes sense that you're thinking about this really broad scope of problems that is a lot to carry. And people often come to you for it because you are great at problem solving and listening. The moment this all changed for me was when my boss, the COO, went to a training that one of our investors provided. The investor is 2 Sigma, and they worked with a company called Life Labs Learning that does training for managers and leaders, among other things. And in this training, they taught a simple coaching tool that all managers and leaders can use, and it's really about good listening skills and good questioning skills. The model they taught is called SOON. SOON stands for success, obstacles, options, and next steps. It's a problem-solving framework that allows you to guide people through solving their own problems rather than you solving them for them. I think a lot of times when people come to us with challenges or problems, our first reaction is, how can I make this better? How can I fix it? What's the solution? And that puts additional burden on you as the PM to do all the thinking and the emotional lifting to figure out what to do. It's a big burden to carry, especially on top of all the other parts of the jobs. So with this model, when somebody comes to you, instead of saying, oh, we should do this, or let me help you with that, your job is to simply guide them through these questions to help them solve their own problem. Now you'll notice there was one other piece, and it's called split track and playback. And that's a key piece of this model. Split track and playback is about the idea of separating out what people are saying into multiple pieces. a lot of times people will come to you and they've wrapped up a bunch of problems into one, and it feels like one tangled mess. And it's your job to pull out those pieces of the mess and play them back, to say them back to the other person so they can hear their thoughts a little more clearly and discreetly. When you're doing this, it's really important that you're using the person who's talking to you language. So if they bring up a problem of being stressed and overwhelmed at work, you don't want to say, oh, that's really frustrating, you're stressed and overwhelmed at work, because you're now adding your own sentiment and language to the mix. You just want to say, oh, it sounds like you're really stressed and overwhelmed at work. You're using their language and playing it right back at them. So the way this model works is you first hear the person's problem or challenge. You listen to the different pieces of what they're presenting you, split them apart. Then you ask them questions about what success looks like. What are the obstacles getting in their way? What are the options for overcoming those obstacles? And then given all that, what are the next steps? So as an example, I'm going to take something that actually came pretty close from real life. It was while I was working at an agency, and we had some code that was supposed to be out the door by, I believe, 5 p.m. It was already way past that deadline, and it was me and another developer staying late at work trying to get this stuff out the door so that we keep our clients happy. And, we ordered food, we're working late, I think we had some milkshakes, and it's clear that the developer's just really blocked. The code's not changing, we're not shipping, can't solve the problem. And I'm there partly for moral support, but partly for, making sure that if there's any questions or challenges or other communication with parts of the team and the client that need to happen, that I'm ready to do that. And as we're sitting there together trying to get this solved, it comes out that this developer's ex-girlfriend was in France and was really sick. She was so sick he wasn't sure how she was going to do or make it. And he was completely distracted and wrought about this idea and torn by the fact that he's sitting here coding when maybe he should be getting on a plane to Europe to be with his loved ones. And my first reaction, this was pre-tool, was to listen and be empathetic and then be like, you got to get on a plane. Like, what's holding you back? Before I knew it, I was literally booking him a ticket to go see his family and friends. And while you could say that was a great friendship or big boundary issues on my part, or maybe both, you could also say that was an opportunity to help that person get past their own blockers. And I think in either way, this had to be addressed for the work to get done. Like, it clearly wasn't going at the current rate. So we had to do something. And what I think I could have done in hindsight is to ask him to break apart this problem for himself. So as an example, he might have come to me saying, Leah, I can't get this done. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm hitting a wall. I've been working on this problem for 12 hours. It's not changing. And I'm so frustrated, and really I should just be on a plane right now with my friends and getting to my friends and family. I'm super stressed. I don't know what to do. And you can hear in there he had a bunch of different problems, right? So the split track part of this might be identifying that he's been working on this for 12 hours. It's a long time to work on something. He no longer knows what to do or how to solve the problem. He's feeling really torn about how his time is being spent. And he also thinks he should be getting on a plane, which is a whole other set of activities, to get to his family. So you might play all those back and say, I hear all these different things. Which of these would you like to focus on first? And that's the key step here, is to find one thread in the challenge that feels like the most important one to start with, because that thread is the one that will help unlock all the others. And it's also really hard to solve 5 problems at once. You just can't do it. It feels like they're super entwined and connected and like you have to solve them all together. But the reality is, often when you pick one to solve, it starts helping unlock all the others. So pretend I play all this back to him and I'm saying, what do you want to focus on right now? Like, what do you think is the biggest issue that I can help you with or that you want to talk through? He might say, the thing that's really, really hurting me the most right now that I most want to focus on is the stress around solving this problem. I feel like if I were just a little less stressed, I'd be a little more clear about everything else. And I might say, okay, so let's focus on the stress part. What would success look like right now? And he might say, well, success would just be I didn't have to deal with any of this. And in response to that, you might have to say, well, we can't control that. We can't control these external things, but we can control your response to it. So in coaching, a lot of times you talk about the things you can control, the things you can't control, and then the stuff in the middle, which you might be able to influence. So kind of reframe and ask him to think about, we can't control the deadline, we can't control the situation with your family and loved ones, but we can control your response to it. And so we're kind of reframing, and the success then in this case might just be responding with a little less stress. And you might say, well, what are some of the obstacles to that? And you might say, well, I just don't feel like I have the time to deal with my own emotions right now. I just need to focus on getting this done. And again, as a coach, you might want to push back or reframe on that and say, well, but you just said that the number one thing right now is to reduce your stress, and that will help with all those other things. So do you see how maybe giving yourself permission to focus on your stress for a minute might actually help all the other situations and actually get you to your end goal? And hopefully they say, yeah, I see your point. And then you might move on to options. So options in this case, you'd say something like, well, what are different ways you might deal with stress? And they might say, I don't know, I don't deal with it that much. And I'd say, I'm sure you've dealt with stress at some point in your life. What are some things you've ever done? And with some prodding, they might say, well, I was stressed last week and it did help when I went for a walk. Or if they're really stuck, you might say like, well, if, and they haven't had any experience in the past that's helpful, you might say, well, is there, if you imagined yourself in the future, looking back at this moment, feeling really stressed out, what kind of advice would you give yourself? These are all just different questions to kind of help them come up with ideas and options for solving the problem. But let's say he identifies that going for a walk is an option. He could say, I could just choose to move on and keep going. That's an option, maybe not as good. And he might say, I actually think I'd be less stressed if I called a developer friend and had somebody to bounce these ideas around with. And you say, great, those are all options. Which one do you think is the best next step? And he might say, well, it's late. I don't really want to call anyone. I know if I just plow through, I'm going to be stuck in the same situation. So I think the best move is to go for a walk first and then decide what to do. And maybe that'll clear my head. And so now you've just gone from messy tangle of a situation through defining success. What are the obstacles, options, and next steps? And that's how you work through the Soon model. And you see that he went from having this overwhelming tangle of problems to deal with to a pretty simple next step, which is I'm going to go for a walk, and that'll help me clear my head so that I can approach the other stuff with more clarity. Next, I want to show you how to use this approach to both manage up and for some facilitation for team meetings. This model is super useful for managing down and across as well, and we'll do more examples of that in our interactive session. But I thought that I would take an example from product management that came up so often in my life, which was somebody coming in, demanding a feature out of the blue and just spazzing out about it. And now it's your job to talk them off the cliff or get it integrated or figure out why they're so stressed out. So in my example, I have a CEO coming to the PM and they're going, we need to launch the new search feature ASAP. I know we will get more users that way, and the investors are really antsy and we can't just sit here doing nothing. Right? And so if you were to apply the split track and playback in that scenario, you might point out, okay, I hear that you want to launch a new feature. I hear that you are worried about the new users and that we need to get more users. And I also hear that the investors are really antsy and that sounds problematic, and that you're feeling like we're just sitting here doing nothing. And I actually think that just sitting here doing nothing is a common challenge with people who are not as in the know of what's happening with product management teams, is they get really stressed out about this feeling of not being able to affect things. So there's a whole other thing there about stakeholder management and cross-team management. But what I'd like to focus on today is bringing us back to the soon model. So splitting it apart into those different things and playing it back to them using their language. And then you'll ask them, which of these do you want to focus on? And I could imagine them picking any of these actually. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to imagine that they say, well, you're the product manager. I want you to focus on the feature problem. And what you'll notice is the person actually skipped through the soon model. They didn't talk about success or goals, and they didn't talk about options and obstacles. They just picked an option and went right to the next step, which is we need to do this. And so you might talk to the person and say, okay, what would be success from launching this new feature? So you're trying to get to the why that triggered the next step in the option they picked, so that you are on the same page about the problem that you're trying to solve and the success that would come from it. So in this case, they might say, well, I want to launch this new feature because I just think that because people aren't able to search, they're not even interested in using our product, and so we don't get any new users. And what I often find happens here when people are coming in asking new features, apart from just the panic ask of needing to do something, a lot of times it's because they don't have the same understanding of what the priority or focus is, like what the goal is of the team and the product right now, or they don't have the same understanding of what the problem is or the obstacles. So in this case, actually, rather than going through the soon model with that person, I might actually encourage the person to come along and sit in a workshop that would use the soon model and get everybody on the team aligned about how to solve this problem. It's also very possible that the team has already done this work and it's a matter of explaining to the stakeholder or CEO where you are in the process and getting realigned on goal and on problem. So for example, in this case, I could imagine a goal alignment issue or a success alignment issue being that the team had decided that new users were not the priority for this quarter based on the OKRs of the company or the larger company goals, but actually retaining and monetizing existing users. So that's what features are getting prioritized. Or, right, so that might be the issue on success alignment, and maybe the CEO or whoever came in and asked, lost sight of that for a moment and need a reminder. Or maybe the focus needs to shift because of new information, and that's also a great conversation to have. But there also might be a problem issue, understanding alignment. So in this case, for example, maybe the goal is to get new users, but the understanding around why you're not getting new users is where there's misinformation or non-alignment. And so that's where it'd be really important, especially if you have a user research team or if you're doing it yourself, to create a good shared foundation of what are the obstacles and what is the understanding you have of why you're not getting new users. So if you were to do a facilitated meeting about this, you might start the meeting saying, okay, our goal right now is trying to figure out how to get new users. And our obstacles are that new users haven't heard of us, and you might brainstorm this list with the team. What are all the reasons we're not getting new users right now? And then you might rank those or explore, you could do a prioritization matrix of which of these are the most important and which of these are the hardest or easiest to solve. And from there, you can have a conversation about options. So what ways do we want to try to solve these problems? There'd be some other brainstorming thrown in here that I'm not going to get into. And you would go through, and again, you might do a prioritization matrix to figure out which of those options you'll move forward with. And then you'd end the meeting and the facilitation with aligning on next steps. What do we need to do to get that stuff done? So I think that's a really cool extension for how to take this soon model and bring it into both stakeholder management and managing up, as well as how to use it in a facilitated meeting. And in both those cases, I can't stress enough how important it is to bring in that split track and playback. So in the example of the facilitated meeting, a lot of times actually, even when talking about users and user problems, you'll get them all mishmashed into one. And again, it's your job as the PM or the facilitator to break them into different issues, right? So maybe they're like, well, we don't have new users because they haven't heard of us, and they're not even checking their inbox, and they don't like blah, blah, and you hear all these ands. And so you might just break that apart and say, okay, so there's an issue of where the users are going to find out about us. You know, we don't know if they're going to mail or they're going to Facebook. And there's another issue about even once they're there, if we know where they are, of them even finding out about us, like us being in the right spot at the right time. Similarly with ideas, a lot of times people will group a bunch of ideas into one, and it's really helpful to untangle that into the different tracks and isolate the different ideas in there. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of how you could use this both to manage up, to run a meeting where you might brainstorm and align on goals, obstacles, options, and next steps, and spark some ideas, I'm sure, about how else you could use this. Some of my other favorite extensions for this are a little looser. They're not using each part of the model, but this general idea of great listening, playback, and questioning. I've used this, for example, in user research. If you're doing some exploratory user research and you want to understand more about a person's pain points, you might ask them a question to describe their day, right? About, let's say you're doing research on something about the kitchen. And you might ask them to walk through all the times they've made a meal. And then you might say, okay, can you tell me of those different things I heard where you talk about, opening the cabinet and not being able to find the food that you want and running out of ideas of what to cook. And you list out all the different things that they brought up during their experience as concrete things. And you might ask a question of like, which of these things that you brought up are the most important to you, or the most painful, or bring you the most joy. So these questions are ways to help them rank and prioritize, which then let you as the PM decide which are potentially the most important ones to focus on with your team. I've also used this even just in planning user research. I've found a lot of times, and this is getting probably better and different as the field is growing, but sometimes people would just be like, oh, we got to go do research. And they would go in and ask some questions and get some valuable information. But often the steps that were missing and the alignment that was missing among the team is, what is the goal of the user research? When we are done with all this user research, what questions do we want to have answered and what information do we want to have? And so that's that goal alignment piece, or what is success of what we're doing. And then I wouldn't necessarily go through the obstacles and options and next steps, but I would generate a list of questions that I think would be helpful towards getting to that successful outcome that we're looking for. Outside of user research and facilitating team meetings, another favorite extension of this model for me is client management. I think it's a great conversation to have when you first start working with a client, is to talk about what success looks like. So you could imagine a client coming to you in partnership with wanting to make an app together. And you're doing your kickoff meeting, you're getting to know each other. First question, success. What would a successful partnership look like to you? And they might bring up the basic stuff that you're expecting, like we launch an app together, it's a great app, yada, yada. But they might also say, and we learned from your team X, Y, and Z things, or we felt really supported along the way. And then you might ask the question about obstacles. So maybe they might say, the question might be like, what do you think will get in the way of us having a successful engagement? And they might say, well, we move really fast. If people can't keep up with us, that's one problem. I also noticed that we work in different time zones. And so if you can't do that, that could be challenging. And they might list a few other things. If not, you might even ask questions about, can you tell me about other partnerships that didn't go well or did go well, to get more ideas about success and obstacles to success. And then you might, for the options piece, you might just ask, are there different options for how you think we might achieve these goals together? And it might just be the basic stuff you're already expecting, but they might have some out-of-the-box ideas of how you're going to collaborate and how you're going to work. I think it's always great to not assume what the working relationship is going to look like and how you're going to meet your goals. And then, as always with any meeting, next steps. Well, how do you move forward towards your goals? What's next to do? So I hope that gave you a couple of different ideas of both how to use the Soon model in the most kind of classic way for managing people, towards slightly adapted ways for managing stakeholders, managing up, running meetings, user research, and client relationships. These are all some ways that I have found it extremely useful in my life, and I find myself using it in all sorts of ways. There's another model called GROW. It's goal, reality, options or obstacles, and will, which is a really similar idea. And if you want to learn more about that, you can just Google it. It's much more widely available on the internet. Hopefully by now you can see how to use this tool in many different situations. And you can see how it might impact your career by increasing your management skills, your leadership skills, and hopefully decreasing the overburdened PM just a bit. But the way it really impacted my career was much deeper than that, because it helped me realize that there are skills and superpowers inside myself that I was underutilizing. This tool at its core is really about great listening, great connecting with people and empathy, organizing ideas and thoughts and problems, and helping people take action, find the way forward that makes sense for them. These are things that I had been doing most of my life, but hadn't really thought much about them. I think a lot of the things that come naturally to us, we often feel like aren't work, don't count, aren't the things we should focus on. We tend to focus instead on all those other bullet points and experiences that we're like, oh, I need this and that and this other thing to fit into this box of what product management looks like. And it can be really limiting to look at yourself that way. So when this tool came around and made me start to feel so differently, I started to think maybe instead of thinking about how I can fit into the box, I should think about how can I use these superpowers to have the impact and the career I want to have. It opened up completely new possibilities. For me, after that realization, I moved on to being an advisor and a coach at a blockchain incubator, where I got to work with people and teams exactly on the stuff we're talking about. I got to help them understand their blocks, their opportunities and strengths, and how to bring their full self to work to be the types of leaders, creators, communicators that they meant to be, that felt authentic to them. After Consensus, I decided to create my own company. I call myself a professional mind organizer, but it's really coaching and product consulting at the end of the day. I use a lot of these same tools every single day to help product teams make healthier teams, more meaningful products, and to help leaders and founders and product people show up in a way at work that feels unique, authentic, and impactful to them. So as you walk away from this session that we've had, well, I hope you are starting to think about how am I going to use this tool. The other thing I really want to encourage you to think about is what are your unique superpowers? What are your skills, the things that you do naturally that bring you joy, that barely feel like work? How can you use those to open up new opportunities in your career and have the impact in the world that you would like to see? Thank you all so much for joining today, and I look forward to talking with you in the interactive session that follows. We'll be doing several more examples of how to use this tool, and I will also be available for Q&A.
Well, thank you, Leah Feuer. Next up, please welcome Tosin Adeniji. Tosin is an experienced product manager for Yahoo Sports at Verizon Media, who is passionate about media tech and building immersive content experiences. She spent her formative career years in the entertainment industry, starting out in marketing at Metropolis Studios and later at EMI Universal, where she worked on names like Coldplay, Katy Perry, Snoop, and more. She made the move to product at a startup building video content platform and then worked with Spotify to deliver and distribute global live streaming. Tosin is keen to see women move up the ranks in tech, particularly Black women, and champions diversity and inclusion through her role as the lead at the Employee Resource Group at Verizon Media. In the next presentation, Tosin will share how to leverage your one-on-one for product success. Please welcome Tosin Adeniji.
Hi everyone, I'm Tosin Adeniji. I'm currently a product manager leading the Yahoo Sports app at Verizon Media. I'm super excited to be speaking at the Women in Product Conference 2020, especially since last year was my first year in attending. Being with so many women product bosses was encouraging, and attending each session definitely solidified my ambition to be successful as possible in the product world. One thing I have often picked up on when having conversations with my fellow women in product is the opportunity for product success and career progression. As many product folks know, your time is hard spent building strong relationships with engineering and design counterparts. Then follow that with your marketing, customer service, research, etc., all the partners. There is often not much time to think about your individual success. And if you're in a startup team, oftentimes you are the one pushing forth all those roles I just mentioned. All in all, limited time is the norm. So when it swings around to your regular one-on-one check-in with your manager, you just end up given a list of status updates that could be shared in many different formats and basically take away the focus from you. This talk is to re-center our focus back onto that check-in and shed light on how you can find product success and possibly a career level up via your regular one-on-one with your manager. Moving our check-ins from tactical updates to strategic conversations focused on you, your product execution, and ultimately your career growth. By the end of this 15 minutes, you will understand the importance of managing up, demystify the manager one-on-one by recentering the conversation back on you, and have a point-by-point framework for any product manager to use so that they can leverage their one-on-one for product and career success. To be a successful product manager, many focus on roadmaps, metrics, and launches, and all of those things are vital. But the importance of managing your career vertically, as well as building relationships across horizontal counterparts, is just as important. So let's get into the room, or the virtual room, your one-on-one. So you sit down, do the 2-minute small talk, and then what happens next in the one-on-one? Do you panic and just overwhelm your manager with the amount of work you have done since the last time you spoke to them? Or are you the type of person that ends up waiting for the manager to take charge and steer the conversation? Or lastly, do you even have a one-on-one? Are they just placeholders that check a box, but always get cancelled, postponed, and ultimately never prioritized? In all of the scenarios I just mentioned, the importance of managing up is crucial. Your manager is meant to facilitate the overall team conversation and help unblock any issues that arise. As a people manager, it's in their best interest that you, a product manager, a rising star, a woman in product, is feeling challenged, supported, valued, and rewarded accordingly. One genuine and easy way to level up in your career is through your one-on-one with your manager. And if you don't have one, nor did I for the first few roles. For 3 years, I worked in a company and never had a one-on-one about my career with my manager. For 3 years, I didn't get a promotion or a pay rise or any new opportunities. Yet I felt like not only did I deserve to get all of those things, but also I clearly had potential. Has anyone else felt like that? Remember that your product success is one thing, but your talent and progression is a success for the company. I just told you about the role where I had no check-in with my manager. Thankfully, my next roles after that, I had a great manager who I still speak to today. We had bi-weekly one-on-ones, and at first I felt awkward, very awkward. What was I meant to talk about? Okay, I will talk about the work that they know I'm up to. So they often went like this. So I just wanted to give you an update on that project. And by the way, I sent an email about that project to that person, and I also followed up with that person about that project. This is what I call status reports. And guess what? All those things can be shared in an open forum in front of people or in an email. So why would you spend 30 minutes to even an hour on sharing all of that every week or every 2 weeks or even monthly? What did I really get out of it? Now, some may say it's an opportunity to share progress, and that is a positive reflection on you. But I would argue still that if there is a private forum for you and a manager to talk, you should take control and use your one-on-ones wisely to discuss things pertaining to you. It's scary at first. As women product bosses, it may even feel like unlike everything we are told. But since everyone listening to this is keen to build rewarding careers and shape the product of the future, I know we can take the leap. I've been practicing this mentality to refocus the one-on-one back on me the last 2 years, and I have definitely seen the fruits of this with 2 promotions in 2 years, opportunities for exciting product launches, and scope to flex my leadership skills. I really put a lot of this down to that private time to discuss my trajectory as the sole conversation starter. One thing that helps you recenter it back on you is a private one-on-one doc that you control. Share with your manager ahead of the meeting so that there are no surprises. But remember, you write the agenda. I would also likely put a recurring time on their calendar, and in the calendar invite, I would attach the agenda, which is a document that both of us can have access to at any time. It's private for the 2 of you. And on that agenda, you do not have to write everything, but you can bullet point your discussion topics and add action points for anything that comes up. So in the last year, as I reflected back on my product success and career progression, I started to build a framework that can be easily transferred to any role, but particularly helping product folk build those rewarding careers. DRIP. Now, I know it's not a very catchy name, but easy to remember. What does DRIP even mean? My framework, DRIP, includes difficulties, relationships, identifying opportunities, and promotion. So let's delve deeper into each one. Difficulties. What are some of the key things you are having difficulty with right now? This one can be tough to talk about with your manager, depending on your relationship. But remember what I said earlier. A people manager should really be there to unblock your issues and ensure you are challenged, supported, and valued. Some other questions you might consider is, what things are you struggling with at work right now? Is there a project you need help with? Or is there any support that you would like to get that you have not been getting? Relationships. As people working in a team, it's not crazy that issues arise. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but if there's ever a time to bring up the conversation, it's during your private one-on-one. Alternatively, maybe there are some introductions or connections you would benefit from. And to ask any other time would be out of context. Things to think about bringing up include, are there any members of the team you would like to highlight? Are there any concerns that you have that you would like your manager to be aware of? Is there anyone you would like to be introduced to? And what more do you need from your manager relationship? Identifying opportunities. As a product manager or associated role, you are only as good as the products that you work on. And maybe you would like to seek other opportunities. This would be a perfect time during your one-on-one to chat through what projects are available, ways to maneuver within the team or company. Are there any new resources to use, or an opportunity to advance with further education? And lastly, promotions. It's a given we need more women product leaders, and that only happens if we ask for and position ourselves for product career success. A one-on-one is the optimal time to discuss all elements of your trajectory. Keep the conversation focused on how can you position yourself for a promotion? What's the leveling criteria within your company? What's the process for promotions? And where does your manager believe you are in the road to promotion? This DRIP framework and criteria always make sure you have something to discuss each meeting without fail. Ultimately, look at your one-on-ones as your responsibility to make the most out of it. Push for success. Push your manager as much as they push you at times. This method has helped me, as I mentioned, get promoted twice in 2 years, nearly double my salary in some of my last roles, and build better, long-lasting relationships with all of my managers. In summary, a few key points to take away. Remember, your success is the company's success. Put the one-on-one on your manager's calendar and don't skip the meeting. You control the agenda, and don't forget to use the DRIP framework. I hope this talk was helpful, and feel free to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at _Miss Tosin. And if you prefer LinkedIn, scan the QR code on the screen to connect with me. All the best in your product success.
Thank you, Leah Feuer, Tosin Adeniji, and all of you who have joined us live. If you would like to connect with our speakers, they are available for question and answers and roundtable discussions in our interactive sessions at 11 o'clock. You can find the sessions on the side navigation of the Hop-in window. Be sure to check out many ways to network with your fellow attendees. Reach out directly or meet someone new in our networking mixers under sessions, where you'll be paired with a fellow PM for a timed chat. In the best practices of product management, we want your feedback. See the in-app agenda to review sessions and talks, then continue the discussions in group chats. Don't forget to check out our virtual selfie station in the #20WIP app. Grab your Women in Product swag at our online store at bonfire.com/store/WIP. I know a lot of us are either currently job seeking or always on the lookout for the next cool opportunity. If that's you, check out the Hop-in sponsor booths. You'll find recruiters ready to chat and PMs from your dream companies to give you the breakdown on what it takes to work here. Thank you again for joining us, and be sure to check out our next session on this stage, Strong Leaders in Unpredictable Times.